Okay, Dave. Oh, this is recording because it's just using your camera. So if I've hit live on Riverside, everything else should be working. Great, good to go. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's such a good studio. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, three, two, one. Well, hey guys, and welcome to the show today. I'm really privileged and excited to be speaking today with a special guest, Michelle Pearce. Michelle Pearce leads the Australian Christian Lobby, leads ACL, and does extraordinary work. ACL does extraordinary work in bringing to light issues that matter to Christians who want to live in Australia in a way where they can express their faith and just be Christian, be normal Christians in many ways, and loving others and obeying the Holy Scriptures. And at the same time, Michelle is a mum and wife, and has an incredible way of balancing that. Sorry, I'm just going to start again. I was really awkward.
No, that's all right.
3, 2, 1. Hey guys, welcome to the show. You're going to love this week. I've got Michelle Pearce, who leads the Australian Christian Lobby, here with us today, and we're going to talk about some cases in Australia that will absolutely blow your mind, in the sense that it's surreal. We can't even believe we're having to have conversations like we're having in courts of law in this country. We'll also cover the US cases that will have the potential to bring a total transformation of the way we look at conversion therapy, and we believe by the end you'll be educated on all you need to know to have discussions with your friends that steer clear of the ideological traps and speak the truth of God's word with grace. So stay tuned. So Michelle Pearce, as I mentioned, she leads Australian Christian Lobby. Michelle, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, PJ. Great to be on with you today and with all your listeners.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So, Michelle, before we get into your role in ACL, I always love to just talk about family. I've got 3 little girls, and I feel like we've got hopefully more to come by the grace of God if that happens for us. But just love hearing about family. You've got a family, and you live there in Canberra.
Yeah, we have my husband John and I, 3 children aged 16, 14, and nearly 11. So, yeah, the kids are a bit older than you, a little bit more independent, but still requiring a lot of emotional support. So, I spend a lot of time with putting them to bed every night, having long conversations about life, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, totally. So, dealing with teenagers, and then you come to work and take a break compared to that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, my predecessor, who you know well, Cindy McGarvey, was just so instructive and helpful for us, thinking about the priority of raising your kids, and it really, I mean, I had these views sort of anyhow, but just recognizing that we do crucial work for God, and sacrifice for Him, but at the same time, that most important work for fathers and mothers is the discipleship of your kids, and
Mm.
I love to hear that you're doing that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when the kids are little, you're required to be there, I mean, as mum, like all the time with supervising and caring for their physical needs. And when they get older, it's a little different because they're a bit more independent. They don't need you by their side all the time, which is a little bit sad because that season's over, but certainly require a lot of, discipleship, emotional care as well for them to have time to express how they're feeling and talk about the deep things that they're thinking and relationship issues that they're having. So, yeah, still very hands on in terms of parenting, even at this stage, but very different from when they're little.
Yeah, little children, little problems, big children, big problems.
Yeah.
Although I just last week heard Erica Commissar talking about the attachment disorders that are associated with
Mm.
this universal childcare approach, and we weren't planning to talk about this, but do you have those same concerns? Maybe even on a personal note, that there seems to be this campaigning about universal childcare, and it's almost like support is always geared towards providing childcare, but not necessarily towards people who want to stay at home with their kids. Is
Mm.
that something ACL is conscious of, or you personally?
Oh, absolutely. And I love how unapologetic Erica Commissar is in describing the harms of what she calls institutionalized care, what we know as just daycare. But it's become so socially acceptable just to put your children in full time, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and think that there's no consequences to that. So, reinvigorating that discussion about mums staying at home, caring for their children, being there to provide for them. Um, and if it's not every hour of the day, that there is other support networks out there that isn't just institutionalized care. If the mum does need to work part time, then there's grandparents, and there's the state can support different ways to look after your children rather than just institutionalized care or daycare. So actually, I saw Senator Matt O'Sullivan yesterday in Parliament. He's a Liberal senator talking about this approach to have more options for parents. So it's good to see the Liberal Party looking at that policy.
Yeah, no, it really is. Glad someone's having that conversation. Yeah, I remember we were with our kids at a church-run like play centre, basically a kids' playground, basically, with some morning tea. And I'm having a conversation with this mum, and she ended up having tears, just saying, "Oh, this is the last day with my kid before I go back to work full time." And there was something in her that she knew that, and she just saw it as like a bit of a transitional grief moment. But I knew, and I think deep down she probably knew there was something deeper going on, that she wasn't meant to be leaving her 6-month-old baby.
Yeah, that's so sad, and it's so young to be going back to work full time. And whilst we pass no judgment on parents that have to make difficult decisions, there just needs to be more of an openness to talking about other ways, and the fact that we don't need to have everything now. We don't need to have a mortgage and a 4-bedroom house and an outdoor area. We can, rent if it means staying at home with your children. So, sometimes when we put finances ahead of the well-being of our children, we fall into this trap. So, but it's not a politically correct conversation to be having. So, but it's a conversation that does need to be had.
Yeah, well, I mean, Erica just really nailed this. She said, appreciate there's a season for everything in life. There will be a time when your career will come back full swing, because your kids are older, but enjoy each season for what it is. And when they're little, they just need that. There really is no substitute for mum. And it may come full circle in what we're going to talk about regarding the laws and sexuality and gender in politics. But most of the data that looks at causal factors for sexual dysfunction or for LGBT identity emergence do regard these primary attachments as key relationships that influence sexuality. I don't want to overstate that because it's a big topic to get into, but albeit to say the role that a parent has shapes so much of the rest of the life of their children in the early days. And not something that you would ever want to put on the altar of a few extra dollars in your super or an additional investment property. And what's more important than your kids? But anyway, I think we agree. But we'll move on. Michelle, I'd love to hear your insights and your experiences being the sort of major Christian lobbying group in our nation, and you would come across reasons to lobby. You'd come across court cases and other things in our nation that are causing great concern, not only to Christians but also to libertarians, people interested in those fundamental human rights and our freedoms that I guess human rights organisations used to rally about before it was identity politics. Tell us what you're seeing around the country.
Yeah, this does form the most major part of our political lobbying, simply because of the attacks that are consistently coming against freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of assembly. And what is astounding is that it makes no sense according to any sort of threshold that you're looking at. We're not abiding by our commitments to United Nations conventions, whatever listeners think of the United Nations, they do have some pretty good thresholds when it comes to human rights. And we're walking all over every single one of them. We're not abiding by them. And within the legislation, you see all these excuses being made as to how we can stretch the meaning of certain conventions to suit our political agenda. And this is an agenda, it's an ideology that's being pushed through every state and federal, every territory. We're seeing a domino effect where one law in one state, the discrimination law is broadened, freedom of speech is attacked, and then that happens in all of the states and territories. So it's good to have a lobby group where we are positioned in every state and territory because we know what's coming. We can see it. If that happened in Queensland, it's not going to be long before we're fighting that battle in Western Australia. And it's consistent, and it's not stopping, and it actually seems to be speeding up. So we're not in a good place as a nation, but we need to continue to resist it and make a stand. And we do have small wins, and that's worth noting. Some of these laws or bills, when they come out, are absolutely terrible. So we have to, go into it and have those conversations and negotiate, write submissions, appear at inquiries. Lobby the politicians, and some amendments are made to make it less restrictive on freedom.
Michelle, maybe you could colour in a little bit what is it that we have signed up to in the UN? Which fundamental human rights, which maybe 20 years ago we took perhaps for granted, but which of those are now under threat or being trampled on by the legislators and our parliamentarians, and what does that mean for Australians? What does that mean in the future?
Yeah, sure. Well, we are signatories to the United Nations Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. They lay out all of those major freedoms, which I just mentioned: freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought and conscience, and provide a means of understanding when certain rights become limited. So in certain occasions when national security is at risk, there may be a justification for not allowing the full freedoms to be operating. Now, the kinds of situations that they explain when freedoms should be limited are very extreme and nowhere near where Australia is at in terms of what our politicians are using as excuses when they say social division or hate speech. It's nowhere near those sorts of thresholds. So we're manipulating these sorts of thresholds and justifying changes to our laws based on what we see as national security issues when clearly they're not. The other one is the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Now, that was the foundation of our Sex Discrimination Act to protect women, but now that has been compromised by placing gender identity within the Sex Discrimination Act, and now a piece of legislation that's meant to protect women has now been trumped by the rights of men who say that they're women. So it's not enacting by any means what it was supposed to within our commitment to the Convention of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women.
Wow. Okay, so this is enormous. I met actually last week Sal Grover for the. I mean, it is just a ridiculous name. Giggle versus tickle.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's an appeal. I believe there'll be an appeal ultimately to the High Court. She spoke about that, and that case is in effect the outworking of what you just described, the removal of the rights of women. So she's developed a social media app for women only. It's an online women's only space, or at least that was the intention. And a biological male who wanted to get on the app has successfully deployed the Human Rights Tribunal I believe I've got this right, but maybe correct if I don't, at taxpayer expense to take her to task for not allowing a biological male who identifies as a female into this female-only space online. That's the essence of the case, right? And that's what we're going to see more of as these laws continue.
That's right. And famously, the judge in that case said, in direct quote, "Sex is changeable." that made international headlines. And the interesting thing is that this case is it was never Parliament's intention that gender identity would trump the rights of women. It's an unintended consequence. But when you read through the debate that they had at that time around this bill, it was still very much about the protection of women. That's what the Sex Discrimination Act was about. And they were just extended those protections to trans women in that legislation. But by doing so, they removed from the legislation back in 2013, when Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister, they removed the biological definition of male and female and then put in gender identity. And so the case on Tickle versus Giggle, the big debate and the discussion was around what was the intended meaning of, or what did Parliament want when they removed the biological definition. And the judge, made up his mind that, well, by removing that definition, it must mean that biology isn't a factor now in sex. And so sex is changeable. And they've come up with this word called legal sex, which means what you legally call yourself is actually what you are. So essentially, Roxanne Tickle, who's a man who thinks he's a woman, is by law a woman and was discriminated as a woman according to his gender identity, which is, I know, confusing, because he's a woman according to the judge's view. So it's just crazy and unbelievable that we're even having this discussion.
It's kind of so unbelievable that I just wonder about the pub test on this one. I remember reading the Daily Mail in Brisbane, I don't know, a couple of years back, and it was just, the headline was, it was a Father's Day headline, and it was "Dad gives birth," and I just thought, I mean, this is so obviously crazy that I don't think your average Queenslander even wants to read that, wants to give any credit to that, and yet we've got legislators in the judiciary who just seem to be so detached from reality. I mean, I don't know how else to, I'm not trying to be mean, there's just no other way to state that. The Emperor's got no clothes on, men can't be women, fifth graders know that, and when you sort of just lightly press against the arguments, they implode. They have to just come up with crafty new definitions. I mean, for a while it was, sex and gender are different. Yeah, we get that sex is binary and immutable, but gender, this whole gender identity thing, even the name of the legislation, gender identity, would, it's an invented category, but let's just play along. Okay, that category is gender and that is changeable, but how did we then move to, I think even Queensland legislators did this too. Sex itself is now changeable, and that is, that's just fantasy.
And that was the agenda all along. And so that's what we need to have our eyes wide open to, is these activists want to remove sex, and or so that people can choose whatever they want to be, and to be socially acceptable. And so one of the big pushes at the moment is to remove male and female toilets, that toilets should be gender neutral. So, saying there's no meaningful difference between male and female, that sex is in your brain, not in your biology. And that's what's being pushed. I don't want to get too much into this, but it's got a sort of transhumanist agenda. So it's pushing into this postmodernism, that is something that it seems foreign to us now, but if this push continues, it could be just very much part of our society, which is scary to think of.
Well, I remember hearing about furries for the first time, and probably for the 5th or the 10th or the 50th time, and I'm still like, okay, very funny, I'm kind of waiting for the punchline, like, this is satire, right? Like, it's satirical, this is not serious, but it's real. There are groups and people, and every time I hear a story, I question, like, is that actually happening? Yeah, it's happening. So it does reach a point where it's not just ACL that needs to be up in arms about this. I think there is really a clarion call to everyday Aussies to just say enough is totally enough.
Yeah.
In the confines of your own home as an adult, Uh, be whoever you want to be. Just that's fine. When it comes to indoctrinating children who are getting really confused and hurt by this, many of whom are getting irreversibly mutilated by this, really you don't need to be an activist to say, I'm willing to stop this whatever the cost. I'm willing to actually put my hand up on my social media accounts, on my to my employer, to my accrediting professional body, for whatever the cost. This is a complete attack on children that's just not okay. You know, I
Absolutely.
love Billboard Chris and many others who are saying, look, here's the solution. There are two sexes, zero genders, and infinite personalities. Let people find wonderful expressions of who they want to be creatively in their personality. That's not a gender. That's not a sex. That's not a sex change. That's just you being you. There's always been tomboys. There'll always be more effeminate guys. It's a bell curve, and that's healthy, and we love that. And we welcome people of all shapes and colours and sizes, but we just don't deny biological reality for the sake of, you know, some person's mental illness. So
Mm.
sorry to rant on, but I mean, it really is a time that we need to, as Christians particularly, get active here in every way that's possible. Is that something you guys at ACL are promoting, and how can people change things?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is playing out for us at the political level because it is the government imposing through not only legislation but through bureaucracy, through DEI, this agenda upon all of society. So that's where the battle is. But all Christians within their own workplaces, within their own churches, within their own families have a part to play in resisting this agenda and speaking out against it as well. That requires courage and conviction and trust in God. But I don't think it's not until we see a whole lot of people lose their jobs and uh, being refused promotions, taking their kids out of school, that we're going to see this change. So the resistance is all part of the change.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to know that we can make a stand and have our place in saving Australia's heart, saving Australia's morality and moral compass. And I mean, let's be honest, the Emperor's got no clothes on. Saving Australia's sanity, I think, is the obvious one. Speaking of insanity, I just have to acknowledge Dr. Gillian. Well, maybe we can talk about Dr. Gillian Spencer later. Sorry, Jasmine Crockett. Um, can you maybe just shed some light on this case? I mean, we've just discussed some unbelievable developments, but I think the case of Jasmine Crockett really takes the case in such a shocking way that I think there's still time to bring this to people's attention and to recognise it doesn't pass the pub test, and we probably need a bit of moral outrage about this one.
Is this, excuse my ignorance, is this Jasmine Sussex, or is it Jasmine Crockett, a different case?
Oh,
Which,
sorry, perhaps I've got the breastfeed, the midwife.
oh yes, yeah, Jasmine Sussex. Sorry, which she may have another last name, so it's possible, but
Oh, I could have got that wrong. Yeah.
no, that's all right. So Jasmine Sussex made an online comment to that men can't breastfeed. Essentially, she's a breastfeeding consultant with the Australian Breastfeeding Association and has been for very many years. Sorry, she's been that for many years. She's very good at her job, and is passionate about it. And she was taken to court for vilification against this man who said he can breastfeed. And yeah, I can't remember exactly where the case is at the moment, but just, yeah, another ridiculous example of somebody just saying blatant truth out there on social media. And she's passionate about it because she helps many, many women with their breastfeeding. These are women with breasts that produce breast milk to support their babies with with the nutrients. And it's difficult for women to get it right. So to have men imposing themselves into that very female only space, for her was outrageous. So Yeah, to see her dragged through the courts is really shocking.
Yeah, I want to drill down maybe on one of the things in that case that was particularly shocking, and it really it highlights widespread academic fraud among medical professional bodies. That's not overstating the situation. In that case, with Jasmine, whichever surname I'm getting wrong probably, but with some of the responses from professional bodies, from doctors, saying, well, we don't actually think that hormone-induced syrup that comes from a male breast is likely to be any different nutritionally from adult female breast milk. Now that is nothing if not quackery. Again, a 5-year-old can tell you that that's wrong, and this is a medical professional and potentially people who have influence over medical governing bodies. We saw recently, I don't know if you saw the New York Times article, which, shocking, from the New York Times, was an opinion piece that really did call out the academic fraud in gender care in the US, as exposed by the College of Plastic Surgeons, just suggesting or recommending that the US plastic surgeons do not conduct transition surgeries for minors because there's insufficient evidence for either its safety or its efficacy. This article in the New York Times cited this process where consensus statements with very little evidence were used by other consensus statements with very little evidence for this sort of circular justification for their statements. And so people would say, well, you know, the APA, the American Psychiatric Association's consensus statement says this, and we think that's right. But really, there was no data to support the safety or efficacy of those procedures. And I think we're seeing a very similar pattern here, where medicos need to be held to account for making a comment like male breast milk's equivalent nutritionally to female breast milk.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And I think actually Jasmine Sussex, I think I said vilification, but I think she was actually stood down from the Australian Breastfeeding Association, so she couldn't continue in her role because of her comments, and that's what we're seeing play out with some other medical professionals as well that are speaking out against things that 5 years ago everybody would have thought was outrageous, and they're simply holding their view that children should not be given medication to block their natural puberty when they're too young to consent to these changes, when it has the potential to make them infertile. You have Dr. Andrew Amos, who is a psychiatrist, quite a prominent psychiatrist, and he just today was in the news that he has been suspended from being able to be critical of child gender medicine on social media. So he's banned from saying anything on social media anymore. Similarly, we saw Gillian Spencer actually stood down from her role through Queensland Health for refusing to partake in gender ideology and give a child puberty blocking medication. So we're seeing this time and time again, and it's not only medical professionals that are suffering because of this, just ordinary people who are speaking out. We know about Lyle Shelton, who said that drag queens are bad role models for children. He's been dragged through the courts. Kira Lee Smith was fined $95,000 for opposing male soccer players in women's sports, in women's soccer. And as we spoke about before, Sal Grover, who simply resisted a man coming onto her female-only platform. So it's a very concerning trajectory that we're on legislatively and through the courts.
Yeah, I want to move to the good news, and maybe unfortunately we have to look to the US to see some of those free speech and let's just call it what it is, common sense wins, and certainly wins more aligned to just fair income Christian values. But before that, maybe you could surmise what you think could be the natural trajectory if we keep going. And I don't want to be alarmist or negative, but I think it's important for us to know, this isn't stopping. You said it earlier. This isn't going away. No one would have dreamed at the start of the sexual revolution, when it was just, just let consenting adults do what they want in the privacy of their own home and don't try and stop them. And that was the what people were told. No one would have thought that you'd be criminalised for saying men can't, or prosecuted for saying men can't breastfeed. But here we are. What would you warn people that the trajectory could be? And what do you think the trajectory could be?
Well, I think what's really concerning about the trajectory we're on is just how we're giving in to lies, how untrue it all is, how far we've strayed from scientific reality. We think secularism and being progressive is, maybe it prides itself in the fact that we don't serve an unseen God, a God that you can't see. People think, oh, well, that's ridiculous to have faith in something that can't be proven. But to say a man can be a woman is denying a reality that's in your face. We all see, we all know the biology that we are. But as Sal Grover said last week at the conference that you and I were at, Paul, this is, if you can make people believe that men can be women, you can make them believe anything. And that's what's scary about the future, is what else can the government make us believe if people are actually believing that men can be women? That's a concerning future.
Gosh, it really is. It makes me think of a quote. Let me just read this to you and our listeners. There's a psychologist by the name of Theodore Dalrymple, and he studied communist societies, and here's what he said. I think it's extremely concerning and telling. But he said, in my study of communist societies, I came to the conclusion that the purpose of communist propaganda was not to persuade or convince, and not to inform, but to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponded to reality, the better.
Jeez.
When people are forced to remain silent when they're being told the most obvious lies, or even worse, when they're forced to repeat the lies themselves, into our culture right now, they lose once and for all their sense of probity, and to assent to obvious lies is in some small way to become evil oneself. One's standing to resist anything is thus eroded or even destroyed. A society of emasculated liars is easy to control. And I think if you examine political correctness, it has the same effect and is intended to. Isn't that an
Very true.
astonishing assessment of our time? These obvious lies, and it's not just that you have to accept others saying them. You've got to play too. You've got to repeat them and just say the emperor's clothes look incredible when he's clearly naked. But to more positive things, I think we should round out with some winning or some good news. There is an expected result to come out of the Supreme Court of the US sometime in the first half of this year. In the case, and I'm talking about it a lot, I think it's important that we talk about it, the case of Charles versus Salazar. So this is a case where a Colorado clinician is taking the Colorado state to court with what she believes is an infringement of her free speech because of conversion therapy bans. Now, the likely or predicted outcome is that the Supreme Court of the US will overturn conversion therapy bans. I have to say that again. It is possible, if not likely, that some point this year, the Supreme Court of the US will rule to overturn conversion therapy bans and make conversion therapy bans themselves illegal, on the basis that there is a viewpoint discrimination, which in effect, in my view, means that the state can mandate that sexuality in support of a therapy is totally fine when it moves from heteronormative heterosexual to one form or other of LGBT identification. But if an individual freely chooses to move in the other direction, that anyone in support of those people is banned, criminalised, deregistered, etc. The full shtick is brought out against them. So if and when that overturning happens, I pray, I hope that we see ripples in Australia, not just ripples in terms of a precedent, but ripples in terms of an awakening of Australians to say something like people should be free to choose their own therapeutic goals. People should be free to choose their own sexual expression, their own sexual orientation, and the state or the government should not impose its ideology on an individual. Um, is that something you are excited by, Michelle, or yeah, think it could have a positive impact here?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's happening in the US. Our governments shut their ears to any sorts of those developments and put it down to Trumpism. And I'm not sure how much impact it will have in Australia, but it'll certainly encourage us that change is possible. And hopefully we are, uh, going to be enacting some of the things that have happened in the US here locally. Hopefully we're in that stream. However, the Victorian Law Reform Commission at the moment are reviewing their conversion therapy laws, and they're looking at broadening their investigative and their enforcement powers. So I'm not sure what more they could do except send in equal opportunity commissioners to spy in churches to, see what's being said from the pulpit. They're already sending people in to train pastors in what they can and can't say and how to abide by the law. So, but meanwhile, we have gender affirmation ideology throughout these laws, which means you have to agree with somebody who wants to change their gender. But at the same time, we're doing a national review on the safety of puberty blocking medication. So you're not allowed to encourage a child not to take puberty blocking medication, while at the same time it's in doubt how safe they actually are. So we're hoping our trajectory, I suppose, in terms of unwinding the conversion therapy laws is once it's revealed how terrible puberty blocking medication actually is. That we can remove that part, at least, of the conversion therapy legislation, so you can have honest discussions with people about their biological sex and being at peace with that and not be intimidated by the law.
Yeah, and it does just beg a belief
Yeah.
that we have that we have legislators who are just so comfortable to be detached, so far detached from reality. I wonder if there's any hope for the civil cases that we're seeing out of the US. I think recently we've seen parents with the Montgomery School Board, parents successfully litigating the school for sort of enforcing LGBT ideology onto their kids with no opt-out clause. I think we saw in New York there was a $2 million lawsuit with Fox Varian, who was a detransitioner who litigated her
Mm.
medical folks. I wonder if the potential for Me Too's and the potential for litigation may have some sort of tempering effect for the just accelerated transition industry.
Yeah.
And I suppose we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I really believe that the tide will turn, and it will take a lot of these cases for it to do that, for then it to reach up to Parliament, for them to begin to change some of these laws. A lot of the politicians are ignorant to what's going on. So a lot of what I do is, and our state directors, is go in and tell them about the cases that are happening. They all think it's outrageous. So there just needs to be enough political will, especially at the party, policy level, to actually take positions on this. And I'm really hopeful that in the lead up to the next federal election, that the coalition, One Nation, will stand for biology and for putting the biological definition back into the Sex Discrimination Act. So, and my hope is more so in the fact that there are a lot of Christians in Australia, a lot of Christians that are waking up. And I don't think society can completely deteriorate when you've got the good people in our nation that we do, the people that are speaking up, organisations like ACL and many others that are having a say, people like you, all doing their own different things but working together for this cause. So I do believe the tide's going to turn. I think God's going to move. People are searching for truth, they're searching for identity, and that can only be found in Christ. So whilst we're seeing this downward spiral politically and culturally, I think we'll see a massive return to Christ and, God willing, a revival in our nation.
That's right. I took such great encouragement at the result, not the death itself, but the result of the tragic martyrdom of Charlie Kirk. And
Mm.
that, I've been in a charismatic church for many years before moving to a different church, and just really we've been praying for revival, as you said, for years. And it was astonishing to me that it wasn't necessarily a big worship gathering or these other things we see that led to the events of after Charlie Kirk's death, but it was the death of a martyr, a truth-telling, politically engaged martyr, that then led to events like his funeral, where the gospel was proclaimed 10 different ways to an audience of 1 billion people. And there were reports of churches being filled, Bible sales going up. So,
Mm.
I always try and pay attention to what is God doing? What is God breathing on? And it seems to me that telling the truth, when it's unpopular and it might cost you a lot, is what God is really breathing on at this time. I remember coming to Christ and just thinking, just preach the gospel, make disciples who read the Bible, that's it. But really right now, I think the gospel is just widening and widening into its application to all these areas of society. God has a lot to say about sexual dysfunction and brokenness and immorality.
Mm.
And when we let people see that and don't hide that away, it's just a much broader on-ramp to the gospel. It just brings relevance. It reminds me of Paul at Mars Hill, when he's speaking the language of Greek philosophers, and he's saying, yeah, but I want to tell you about Christ. And there's just this great opportunity when we discuss abortion. We talk about the beauty and the sanctity of all life at all stages. When we talk about the dignity of older people and that their lives are worthwhile in preserving, that it's costly to preserve them and it's a cost worth paying. And of
Mm.
course, when we talk about God's stunning plan that we opened with for marriage, biological production, when a man and a woman come together in covenant and produce a baby, and that's the context and the confines under which children flourish. All these things are just great opportunities to speak of the goodness and the wonder of God. And I pray and hope bring more people to Him, rather than you can believe that lie. Oh, it's too divisive. Don't talk about it. People won't want Christianity if you speak like that. Well, I think the exact opposite is true.
That's exactly right. And all of these things that we're against that are happening in our nation, they just provide an opportunity to declare what we're for. And some people say, well, we're known for what we're against. We should be known by what we're for. I see it differently. I see all of these things that we're against actually provide the opportunity to declare the truth. So, in terms of uh, us being concerned about the evil trajectory our society is on, I can see how God can use every single one of these issues to turn it around for the good and glory of Him, and to make the case for human flourishing and make the case for the gospel ultimately, which is where we want to see people, to respond to that, to respond to truth.
Amen. Well, Michelle, I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. God bless you in your work. We will keep praying for you, and I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Paul.
God bless. Bye. All right. I think that's it. Michelle, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Yeah, all good.
Whoops, I glitched on Jasmine Crockett, Jasmine Sussex. No. One thing real quick, Michelle, just before you go, our board reviewed again this plan I have to sort of publicly pray for a person in a really intentional way, and it is a green light. We're just going to get John Steenhoff to give some final thoughts on how to do that.
On how much it's going to cost when you get taken to court. No.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to drag other people down with me, so we'll see how we go.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll be happy to be dragged down with you. I think these things will provide, an opportunity to make the case. So it gives it more publicity.
I gave it a lot of prayer, and felt like it was a God idea. And who would have ever thought in Christian ministry you'd be in civil disobedience in Australia? But anyways, bizarre.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Really appreciate your time. Bless you.
Thanks for having me on. See ya.